All right, welcome everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers. Just a real quick message video here. If anybody's been watching the news, you would have seen that Iran's begun striking Israel. I'm not going to sit here and play politics and all this and who hit first and Iran's retaliating against Israel. Israel did strike Iran first in a preemptive attack. I'm not here to talk politics, just stating what is. The fact is that Iran is attacking Jerusalem specifically, not just Israel. This is important because, as I've said in my End Days Proof book, and for many years on my channel, in the prophecy of Zechariah and Ezekiel, it talks about the armies of Gog Magog. And for a very long time in Christianity, everybody speculated that Gog Magog were, sometimes even a mythical tribe or race of peoples that have been hidden that will emerge, or they tried to equate them with Russia and China. And lots of people have had theories. But I've shown that if you look at the verses of Ezekiel's prophecy, he literally states what nations make up the tribes called Gog Magog. He names them off. I think there's 5 of them. One of them is Iran. But long story short, and I've said this in many videos already, but the thing is that after October 7th in 2023, the year of the end days, like I showed in the book, that's when the attack on Israel started. At first it involved Hamas. Hamas is, I don't know the proper terms for it, but is like in some way connected or controlled by Iran. So they're not a completely separate entity. But nonetheless, Hamas started the attack on October 7th, 2023. But in the time that has passed since then, certain nations have joined in allegiance and alliance against Israel. And they are the very nations named in Ezekiel's prophecy. So I said this before. And just to drive it home for everybody, when this book was written, Ezekiel and in Zechariah, these are written hundreds of years BC, hundreds, if not 500 or 600 years before Christ, BC, as it's called. And there's no way that somebody living back then, 2,500 years ago, would have any clue as to what nations would exist 2,500 years later. The prophecy is a real prophecy, like the other biblical prophecies are. And it's just all coming true. And as I've said many times before, Ezekiel specifies that Magog's armies will only go to attack Israel once Israel has been reborn. That occurred in 1948. Okay, undeniably, Israel was reborn after nearly 2,000 years in 1948. And the people of God started to return there. It was the ingathering, and I think millions have returned there since 1948. So Ezekiel's prophecy is, those early stages of it were fulfilled back then. And then it says that it's only at this time when these other nations will gather together in, allegiance against Israel. They will surround Israel, as Ezekiel and Zechariah specify. They're both talking about the same event in the same end days war. So all these things have come true. So those nations have gathered around Israel and have been attacking it since late 2023. And as I've said for a long time now, perhaps years at this point, I've lost track. But I've been warning that, in a line of dominoes, you push the first one over and all the rest follow. Then you have the final domino. If you're looking at the biblical prophecies that pertain to, when the end will occur, every single one of them has, all these dominoes have already been fulfilled. So all those dominoes have already started. Tick, 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 tick. The very last domino, the very last prophecy, is in Zechariah and Ezekiel, when the Gog Magog armies attack Israel, which will culminate, as Zechariah specifies, in the attack on Jerusalem. I think Ezekiel might also mention that. But it's when they attack Jerusalem that it specifies that the Messiah and even God himself in some way, and the armies of heaven will arrive. There will be hail, perhaps meteorites, asteroids, comets, whatever it is, comet fragments raining down on the earth. God will bring down fire from the heavens and will destroy the armies of Gog Magog, and it will be the end of days. The end days process will start. The judgment will begin. So So it is the final domino when these armies attack Jerusalem. So, like I said, they started attacking Israel. Jerusalem's in Israel. They started attacking Israel in late 2023. That's been, I don't know, 1.5 years already that we've been at, just at the last domino. But that domino has been tipped over after October 7th, and in 2024 when those nations gathered. So that final domino has already been knocked, and it's tipping over, and it is the final domino. The only thing to remain before that domino hits flat and all the prophecies are fulfilled is them attacking Jerusalem. But that has happened today. I've been keeping track of this and looking at history and everything for the last, months, maybe a couple years or so. When has Jerusalem been attacked, in history and this and that there. What's happened today is unprecedented, in my opinion. I think that's fairly accurate to say that it's unprecedented because this was, we had however many missiles raining over Jerusalem to actually strike Jerusalem itself. As some of the news reporters, I have some quotes here. So CNN stated, during the attack, CNN's teams in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem could hear large explosions, which confirms that Jerusalem was under attack. Also, another source, the DW.com, whatever that is, said that air raid sirens were heard in Jerusalem during the Iranian retaliatory attack. Quote, explosions were heard over Jerusalem. This indicates that Jerusalem was indeed targeted during the Iranian strikes. I remember the Iron Dome is probably extinguishing a good portion of the things that are coming in. So these things are definitely happening. The AP news source mentioned in a second round of attacks, sirens and explosions, possibly from Israeli interceptors, could be heard booming in the sky over Jerusalem early Saturday, which would suggest that even if missiles were intercepted by the Iron Dome and such, the city was still under attack. So it's definitely happening. There have been, I don't know the correct terms, but, like skirmishes or smaller things happening. I'm not trying to belittle the bad events that took place in history where bad things have happened in Jerusalem, attacks have happened in Jerusalem. But this one here is pretty unprecedented. And it's in light of, the current situation and scenario that I've just talked about. This isn't just a one-off thing in history. This is connected to the overall of what's happening right now. And what's happening right now, including this attack on Jerusalem, is all written in the prophecy. So more so than ever right now, like as I speak right now, in all the thousands of years of history, we right now are at the closest point to the Messiah and the end of days actually arriving. Like, it's more real, more proven, more validated. The things are actually taking place. And right now, we are at the absolute closest in all of human history to this occurring with validation, like I said, right? This is no meager thing. And I thank God that in this last week or two, I have reformed from, those last few sins that I was doing, the ones that I think would cause me trouble on judgment. And, I thank God for that. Maybe I did it myself. Maybe he helped me. I don't know. I'm not going to worry about that. But I'm proud of myself for conquering those things. And it's felt more everlasting in terms of my reformation from it than ever before in my life. I feel resolved and changed on the inside where I don't want to do those things anymore, where I wasn't like that before. And let this be a lesson for all, because we all have to reform to be saved. But thank God, I have to vouch for this. Thank God that I did these last steps in Reformation. Still not a perfect person, don't get me wrong, but it was very important that I cleanse myself, and thank God that I have achieved what I have achieved in these last weeks. Because at any given moment, in all reality, the arrival could happen. At any given moment, the arrival could happen. So it doesn't matter what I think will happen. Doesn't matter what I feel like will happen. I've lived long enough to know that you're not always right in what you think or feel will happen. And it's really just meaningless opinion. But looking at the facts and the things that we could validate and substantiate, we don't need people's opinions. It's imminent. Like, it is more imminent now. Like, they hadn't attacked Jerusalem like this or at all since October 7th. Like, I've been tracking it. It hasn't happened. Today marks the closest we ever have been. I don't have time to sit here and read all the scripture, but in Zechariah, I believe chapter 12, it talks about the start of this, and also some other things. But it does mention some of this event in Zechariah 12, but Zechariah 14 is the main chapter. So, example, it says, Lo, a day has come to God, and divided has been thy spoil in thy midst. And I have gathered all the nations unto Jerusalem to battle. What nations? Not all the nations of the planet, but the very nations that Zechariah is talking about are the ones that Ezekiel is talking about, because they're talking about the same one event with all the key, things transpiring in terms and all of that. It's definitely the same one event. That's not my opinion. Any biblical scholar could tell you that. So even though Zechariah doesn't mention by name Gog, Magog, and this and that there, or what nations are doing it, when Zechariah says all the nations, he's not saying, and he didn't say all the nations on the planet, because why would the whole planet turn against Israel? That's ridiculous. He is talking about the certain nations that Ezekiel specified, right? So reading on in verse 2, and I've gathered all the nations unto Jerusalem to battle, and captured has been the city. And spoiled have been the houses, and the women are lain with. Gone forth is half the city in a removal, and the remnant of the people are not cut off from the city. Now, shockingly, this verse, as terrible as it sounds, these things, these type of things, as described, did take place in the October 7th attacks. However, the October 7th attacks, unless I'm mistaken, didn't take place in Jerusalem. And if they did, I missed something super important, and we're even closer than ever before. But the point is that not the point is, but I just wanted to point out that this verse and the terrible things that it says, we saw a premonition of it. Like, it actually took place in October 7th. Like, those type of things as described took place. So it's not like the possibility of what's said in these prophecies is far away or something that could never happen. Like, these type of things have already happened involving the very nations that Ezekiel specified, right? So that's not a coincidence that it's taking place in the world, right? It's prophecy being fulfilled. So in verse 3, it says, and gone forth has God, and he has fought against those nations as in the day of his fighting, in a day of conflict. So God arrives to fight against, God's forces, or God arrives in whatever way that he will, to fight against Gog Magog, the enemies of Israel, right? That this is the starting kickoff event that triggers the end days arrival. They go and attack Israel. When they attack Jerusalem, that's when Messiah, God, and the forces of God and the judgment day arrive, right? So right here, verse 3, God's arriving. In verse 4, and stood of his feet in that day on the Mount of Olives, that is before Jerusalem eastward, and cleft has been the Mount of Olives in its midst. That very famous verse, right? And it talks about in verse 6, it has come to pass in that day the precious light is not, it is dense darkness, and there has been one day, it is known to God, not day or night, and it has been at evening time, there is light. And it has come to pass in that day, go forth through living waters from Jerusalem. And the verse 9, and God has become king over all the land. In that day there is one God, and his name one. And then it starts to talk about how the world will be changed physically and everything. Right? So this is the great grand arrival of the end days. Each of the prophets described this great event in slightly different ways. We had Daniel talking about seeing the Messiah specifically arriving from the heavens. We have Revelation even talking about it in detail. But they're all describing the same one event, the arrival of Messiah and the forces of God, as part of the great judgment day. So that's the initiation of it. And what triggers it off is this attack on Jerusalem. So these things are taking place right now. And don't say I didn't warn you. If the end of days does come now, if they go and do some nasty attack on Jerusalem, like they break through the Iron Dome, or they invade it, whatever it might be, or God forbid they launch a nuclear bomb at Jerusalem, whatever it is they have up their sleeve planned, and whatever it is that they will do, at any given moment, we could see the end of days arrive. So my parting words to everybody is, reform from your sins like I have done. Okay, again, I'm still not perfect, but I'm at the best state that I've ever been in my entire life, except for when I was a nice squeaky clean child. But yeah, as an adult, I'm in the best position that I've ever been before in terms of my sinlessness and my reformation and my opposition to sins and revulsion of sin and so forth. I urge everybody else, you better reform like that too, because we don't know if it's going to be a year from now. We don't know if it's going to be months or weeks or days or minutes or seconds. We don't know, right? So just like how that plane crashed the other day in India and hundreds of people passed away, they didn't know that was going to happen. They got on the plane, then minutes later it crashes, right? You don't know what the future holds. Don't take it for granted. Take that plane as a lesson too. I mean, we could be sitting here twiddling our thumbs thinking, oh, it's not going to happen tonight. It's not going to happen tomorrow. Maybe it won't. But don't be living like it's not going to happen, because it could, right? So be ready, be watching, be wise, and most importantly, reform. That's the only thing that's going to save you when all these terrible things start happening. So, anyways, we can only hope and pray. I would be really, really touched. I mean, I've spent so long teaching and warning people about this, like my fuses on it are blown, so I don't act emotional about it anymore. But I've waited for the arrival and anticipated for it, and I started my studies on when the end would occur 20 something years ago when I was 18 years old. So I've been waiting a long time for this, a very long time. My fuses are blown, so I may not show the emotion, but I would be, I don't even know the right word for it, touched, honored, blown away, mesmerized, captivated, overcome, just all these different emotions if the arrival occurs anytime soon, like even a year from now. Like I will be just so happy, relieved, just everything. It would be absolutely amazing. If we pass in judgment, we would get to be reunited with our lost loved ones, and we'll all get to be together and living happy in a better world, right? So, what more could you ask for? Um, and God with the people and everything, right? So that's what I've always wanted and hoped for, and I would just be really, really, overjoyed, happy, relieved, everything. Like I said, you can't sum it up into one emotional word. I would just be like overwhelmed in a positive way if it occurred. It would be such a huge relief because I've waited so long for it. Um, but we just have to be patient and see what happens, right? We don't want war to happen, but we also don't control it, us. The war is happening. We're just observers making our own observations, right? So I don't want bad things to happen to any country. Um, I just want the end of days to arrive. So it's not that I want, you know, those certain things to happen, like to Jerusalem. Of course, I don't want that to happen, but I'm just going on the notion that we are told these things will occur to, kick off the arrival of God and Messiah. So, anyways, don't say I didn't warn you. I've been warning people for many years. Not many people listened or believed, but now we have more proof than ever before. You know what I mean? So there you go. But anyways, take care, folks, and God bless. Oh, hey, man.